Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this November 25, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Flooding in southern Morocco has killed 32 people and 6 others are missing after the heavy rains, according to officials. While flash floods are fairly common in Morocco, the recent downpours have been particularly intense, as BBC's weather reporter Alex Deacon will say in our opening video.
From these storms, creating flash flooding, and unfortunately many people were cut up in the devastating torrents that swept through the usually dry riverbeds. The Gilmeen region on the edge of the Sahara Desert bore the brunt of these storms. It's here that teams worked around the people. It was reported that the Army and the Royal Guard rescued around 200 people, but sadly 32 people died, including a 9-year-old girl who was swept away by the Tamsut River. 6 people are still reportedly missing, and the authorities saying that many of the dead and missing came from families that were trapped in vehicles simply washed away by the waters. Around 100 mud brick homes were partially or totally destroyed. Around 100 roads, including 6 national highways, were also cut off in the floods. Now, flash flooding is reasonably common in Morocco, but obviously these were particularly intense downpours.
Okay, Alex, and thank you very much for that report. We do have news tonight regarding the Pope's speaking. As I've been telling you for days and weeks, he would be speaking before the European Parliament at its headquarters in Strasbourg, France. Interesting, too, that the headquarters of the EU is in a city in the country of modern-day Reuben, and yet it is in Strasbourg. And either they moved up the date on us, or Prince, somehow I wrote it down wrong or something and missed it by a day. The Pope has come and he's gone. He spoke today in Strasbourg, but we have it. Thankfully I've been watching for it, and BBC picked up on it, and I've got video on that coming up for you after this story. While we are on the subject of people being killed by disasters, I want to go ahead and go to this story in Cairo, Egypt, where at least 17 people have been killed after a block of flats collapsed in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. You'll see in this video how 7 people were also injured when an 8-story building in the western suburbs collapsed overnight. And you'll see in the video also how building collapses happen regularly in Egypt due to illegal construction and poor enforcement of regulations. Orla Gorin has this report.
Well, the digging is continuing here. Heavy equipment is in use, and we've also seen rescuers searching with their bare hands, but hopes of finding any remaining survivors beneath the rubble have faded. Local residents say the building came down overnight in a matter of seconds, killing the residents as they slept. This is a recurring nightmare in Egypt. Buildings collapse on average every few months. Campaigners blame lack of oversight and unauthorized construction. Local residents tell us that this building was originally 3 stories high. They say it was built with wooden supports rather than concrete, and then 2 more floors were added, bringing the level up to 5 floors, and then 2 further floors, so it became a 7-story structure. They say that the residents were given notice to quit at one stage, but no one left because they had nowhere to go. And locals are now asking if anybody will be held to account for this tragedy.
Thank you very much, Orla Gurin, for that report. Friends, I want to put our chart up on the screen for just a moment before we go to our next story and just explain our first story. We related it to both stories, both the first and the second story, the one you just heard and the one before that with the flooding. We related that to the fourth seal from the book of Revelation. You see 4 columns over in our slide. It's labeled with number 4 and pale. That means this is the fourth seal of Revelation 6, and Revelation depicts the fourth seal as a pale horse. That's why we have a pale green color there and the word pale. And the rider of that horse is described in Revelation 6 as a rider whose name is Death. And the rider and the horse and the pale horse are described as being ridden alongside Hades, hell, the grave. And the first couple of stories, there were deaths from the flooding, and there were deaths from the building collapse. And now let me explain the 3 terms that Jesus Christ used to describe the activities of this horse. If you look down at the bottom of that column where it says pale, has the number 4 and the little pale colored green horse at the top of that column. Down toward the bottom after it says plagues, if you can see that on your screen, it says, first of all, loimos. That's the primary term that Jesus Christ used in the Greek language that he was speaking at the time, that the gospel, or you may have been speaking Aramaic, but the gospel writers wrote it up in Greek in the text that most of your Bibles are translated from, a Greek original text. And that word loimos means disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. And that's the primary thing that's been emphasized about this seal. And whether you'd hang them directly on the seal or not, for activities between the third seal and the fifth seal, Jesus Christ said there would be seismus. And your Greek-English lexicons define seismus as commotions in the air, and it gives the example of gale force winds, and of course that includes hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons, all kind of gale force winds, commotions in the air. That can even include volcanic eruptions spewing up into the air, and rain that falls from the air to the ground. But the other aspect of seismus is commotions on the ground, and the example given is earthquakes. But there are other commotions on the ground. There are, I mentioned volcanic eruptions. They commence from the ground, even though they spew ash and dust and smoke up into the air. But then you've got tsunamis, you've got flooding that comes from the air to the ground. You've got wildfires that originate from the ground. Any kind of seismic commotion that goes into the air or comes from the ground or affects the ground. That's seismus, and that's one of the conditions Jesus Christ said would occur between the third seal and the fifth seal, and that really leaves the positioning of the fourth seal. He also used the term that only Mark wrote up in the 13th chapter, verse 8, terake, however you would pronounce it in the Greek, defined in the Greek-English lexicons as disturbances, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively in the sense of mobs and seditions, and we'll certainly be seeing that kind of activity in a news report we'll have later in the program coming out of Ferguson. But that's the fourth seal related to the first 2 stories. This next story is going to relate to the first seal, which is depicted in the book of Revelation as a white horse. And in plain language, Jesus Christ described the actuality of this horse as by saying, "Let no man deceive you. There will be many coming in my name," and even claiming that I, Jesus, am the Christ, and yet they will deceive many. So these false Christs, these deceivers, don't be deceived by them. Jesus Christ warned us. And again, that first seal is depicted by a white horse. And in Revelation 12, verse 9, Jesus Christ told us through a vision he gave to the Apostle John on the Isle of Patmos. He told us, as we'll can see from Revelation 12 and verse 9, that the God of this world has largely deceived the whole world. Let's take a look at that verse real quickly before we go to the next story, because some of you watching this will understand from your studies and your being taught by Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, you'll understand from a long time ago this verse, but some who may have stumbled upon our newscast, and I know there are a few of you that watch who have no idea of the church that's behind this broadcast and the longevity of that church, which goes all the way back to Jesus Christ through 6 successive eras up to this point, and a 7th era yet to come. Now, some are going to say that 7th era is here, but Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong told us that despite an attitude that may be here already that lines up with the 7th era, God, through his servant, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, told us that the actuality, the actual formal beginning, commencement of the 7th era of God's church in the New Testament time would begin or commence when the 5th seal, let me put that slide back up on the screen. It would commence when the 5th seal begins, when the Great Tribulation begins, a great time of trouble. Mega trouble are the words literally in Greek. We call it in English Great Tribulation. Tribulation, trouble. Jesus Christ described it in verses going back to the Old Testament as the time of Jacob's trouble. And he described it in Matthew 24, around verses 20, 21, 22, as the Great Tribulation, a time of trouble such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. And he went on to say, no, nor ever shall be. In other words, it's a time so bad, nothing before it's ever been so bad, and thankfully nothing after it ever again will be as bad. And it'll be the time of World War III. It'll be the time when the Pope christens or puts a crown upon the 7th and final head of the emperor, who, as the Bible calls him, a beast, who together with the Pope, they'll revive the Holy Roman Empire for its final time, its final revision, its final restoration, its final coming out of the pit. It came out for a very temporary time during the 6th head and revival of the Holy Roman Empire between 1936 and 1945, when, after Mussolini invaded Ethiopia and then proclaimed that he had revived the Holy Roman Empire. The apostle God has been using for the end time, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, I mentioned his name several times during my opening here of the program tonight, but God used that man and helped him and opened up his mind to understand in 1936, when Mr. Armstrong would have been then 36 plus 8, that would have made him around 42, possibly 43 years old. 36 and 8, did I add that up right? No, let's see, 44, he would have been 43 or 44 years old in 1936. He was born in 1892 in July, and God opened his mind to see and be able to tell the rest of us that Mussolini, as Mussolini claimed, had indeed revived, resurrected the old Holy Roman Empire, brought it out of the pit for a short 9 years. Let's see, 36 to 45, a short 9 years. And that fits in with I was going to read you Revelation 12:9. We'll come back to that. Let's flip over to Revelation. Let's see, what was I saying? Mussolini revived that for a short 9 years. Let's go back just to Revelation 11. And let's see, can I find it now while I'm live on the air. I'll put myself on the spot here. There is a verse, and I believe it's around 19. Wait a minute. No, I want Revelation 17, verse 10, which says, as it says on the left side of our chart up here. Can I pull this forward to you for you while I read that part of the chart? Now I'm on a different layer than I would normally be on because we're having to operate off of our backup equipment. And I did something today, friends. I think it's resolved it. The past several nights, our program, our encoder, has been stuttering. You've probably heard that while I've spoken, while some of the videos have been playing. But I think we finally, I cleaned up the encoder today. I have totally uninstalled the software that runs the encoder and reinstalled it. And I was told that should clear up the problem. We'll see after I get to watch it with you tonight, the recording from the archive, and see if we finally managed to get rid of the stuttering that it would do during a broadcast. It could be kind of irritating, and troublesome to me too. And I think we cleared it up. But on this other layer, if this will let me layer it on top, I can take you to a close-up portion. There we go. We're able to dissolve to it anyway. At the bottom of this chart, at the top of this chart, see, can I go to the top of it? Well, this is where we want to focus in closely anyway, really. At the top of this chart, it says that there are 7 kings, just as it does say in Revelation 17, verse 10, and there are 7 kings. Then the verse says, right after there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, just like it says now at the top of your screen. And one is, and the other is not yet come. The one that is the one you can see where you see on the right side there's a picture of a man with his hand raised in the air. That's Mussolini standing just behind Hitler in this photograph. And that part of verse 10 of Revelation 17 represents Mussolini, who, as we mentioned a moment ago, he invaded Ethiopia in 1936 and didn't hit the front pages of the newspapers. It was buried several pages back, but God led Mr. Armstrong to see those pages in the newspaper that said Mussolini claims he's revived the old Holy Roman Empire. And by God's Spirit, Mr. Armstrong understood, hey, this is a fulfillment of this part of verse 10 of Revelation 17. There are 7 kings. We understood who the 5 who are fallen were. I wish I could zoom in on the 5 that are fallen part of this. Let me just look through my shot list here and see if I've got a shot I can zoom that to for that. I don't. Let me come back out of this for just a second. I'm going to check and see if on another layer we have a close-up of that side of the screen, the far side over there where you can see all 5. I may have accidentally, while I was trying to clean this up and get the stuttering out of it, I may have accidentally erased that part of the, that's not what I want over there. Hey, this part here, well, in black and white, you can see the top part. There are pictures of the 5 kings that are fallen. We know who those are. Even in history, your commentaries, that's not a big secret. We know who those 5 who are fallen are. But until Mr. Herbert Armstrong, God had not revealed who are, there, put them in color now, he had not revealed who that 6th king, or that 6th emperor, that head of the revived Holy Roman Empire, revived, as I mentioned, a short 9 years between 1936 and 1945. And yet Mr. Armstrong understood it, and God used that to show us who is the servant of the last days that God was and is, even though he's in the grave now since 1986. We've got recordings of his broadcast, his sermons, his Bible studies. It is as if, and they're more available now to everyone than they were before, because you can Google search them on the internet. You can find them on our library page, on our home page for cogtv.org. Those recordings of Mr. Armstrong's speaking are so available now. You can listen to them on demand 24 hours a day. So you're able to get his broadcast now more than when he was alive. And it's as if he were speaking from the grave, or as if he were still alive, or, as I just said, at least as if he's speaking from the grave. A more powerful message in a way. And the things that he said are more relevant today than they were at the time when he was alive saying them. But those 5 kings at the top, they're fallen, according to the first part of Revelation 10. And then it says, and one is. And again, that one that is, let me go back. Let's see, can I cover this up with this one? Yeah, we'll resolve down to the bottom. That one that is, as Mr. Armstrong was shown by God, was Mussolini, 1936 to 1945, during Mr. Armstrong's beginning days of broadcasting to this nation. And, of course, having that knowledge, and anybody else who knows this now, they were not first with this. Mr. Armstrong was first with it, and that was to show us who is God's servant. And it is Mr. Armstrong, and that's a point. I know I'm emphasizing that a lot, but it's a point that cannot be emphasized enough. You know, in his last couple or 3 years, I used to hear Mr. Armstrong in person when he would say, friends, I'm going to come back out of this for just a moment, when he would say to us, brethren, some of you aren't getting it. And we used to wonder, well, what is it he's saying we aren't getting? And I think I've prayed and fasted and asked God that question enough that the answer that's in my mind after praying many, many, many times and fasting about it is that God was using Mr. Armstrong as his end-time servant. And when Mr. Armstrong would say, brethren, some of you aren't getting it, because we were treating Mr. Armstrong too familiarly, because of his humility. We were treating him in a very commonplace manner, which, God really upheld his servant Moses, as we see from the scriptures. Even when his brother and sister spoke against him, God came down himself and had a good talk with Miriam and Aaron, and in fact put leprosy upon them. And Miriam's attitude was such, he took it off of Aaron right away, but left it on Miriam for a week, and she had to be put outside the camp for that week. But some of us didn't get it, that were right there next to Mr. Armstrong, rubbing shoulders with him, having conversations with him from time to time, and not getting the fact that God had put him in an extremely high position for dealing with the world and bringing a message from God to those of us who were called for the spring harvest, and a message for the rest of the world that will be called later in the fall harvest, for those of you who understand that. But to the point now, let's go back to this part of the chart at the very bottom in the lower right-hand corner that says, let me get the right part of that chart there. This is, and one is, and that was 1936 to 1945. That one was Mussolini, the 6th head of the revived Holy Roman Empire. Now in 1945, back into the pit the Holy Roman Empire went, and the rest of this verse says, and the other is not yet come. So on the bottom of this slide, we say, and the other's not yet come. There's one yet to come. And it will represent the 7th and final revision of the revived Holy Roman Empire by 10 rulers under one dictator leader, one emperor, whom the Pope will crown. And that's why, friends, this next story has been very important to me, in that with the Pope going and speaking before the European Parliament at its headquarters in Strasbourg, France, this week. In fact, today, speaking today, one reason that's so important to me was, would he say anything that would lend itself toward his being involved, and this particular Pope being involved with the selection of a new emperor for the Holy Roman Empire, or putting it in layman's terms for what's happening right now, would he become involved in helping to pick an overall leader for the EU? But of course, there's another element that has to play into that. Many of you know it, and I'll be singing to the choir as I say this. But some of you who don't know it will be getting this, who will be getting it for the first time. You want to remember this, that. And if you do know this, but you'd forgotten, maybe this is a good reminder, that at the time the seventh and final head of the Holy Roman Empire is coronated, as he will be by the Pope, by and through the hands of the Pope, in the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany. That's where it's always been done before, and there's no reason historically why that should change for the coronation ceremony and the crowning of the final head, the seventh head of the Holy Roman Empire, revived. It will be again in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Emperor's Hall. Like I said, that's always where it's been done. And when that is done, that'll kick off the fifth seal. And the time of the Great Tribulation, time of World War III, will be right on the heels of that. And a time of trouble for Jacob. It'll be a time of the martyrdom of God's saints once again, because this revived Holy Roman Empire will require people to bow down to the image of the beast, and it will require them to not Judaize, as they put it in the 4th century, 325 AD, in the Council of Nicaea, where they said, if you refuse to work on the Sabbath and you want to worship on the Sabbath like the Jews, you are Judaizing. Sorry, Mr. Netanyahu. Of course, I heard Mr. Netanyahu say something last night as he was speaking well against the stupidity of the naivete of dealing with Iran, contrary to what the advice of former Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State George P. Shultz said. You deal with Iran, they'll smile at you, they'll send you on your way, you think you want a deal, and they will cut your throat. Even they themselves said it with the advisor to the former president of Iran, saying, you think you deal with us and you'll go away thinking you won, but you've lost, because our word is no good, is essentially what he said in between the lines. But when that seventh and final head is revived, and the Pope crowns him in a coronation ceremony in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Emperor's Hall, the Great Tribulation will then be here. And at the same time, that is when Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong has told us, formally and officially, the seventh era, the Laodicean era of God's church, which is it is a part of God's church. They are commandment keeping. Those who stay loyal, as Christ will come and knock on the doors and say to those who are left behind and not taken to a place of protection and final training, God will then come to them, as he says in another part of Revelation, and say, in Revelation 3, latter part, somewhere around verse 20, 19, 17, 18, 20, somewhere in there, he says, he'll come and knock and say, be vigilant, be diligent, hang in there, be faithful, endure to the end, as I endured the crucifixion, a martyrdom. You endure the martyrdom, and you'll sup with me at my table. Now that's encouragement to those that are left behind. It'll encourage the heart to face martyrdom, to face being torn apart, or tortured, or burned at the stake, or having their heads cut off, however the beast will decide to do this. God will encourage those who thought they had it made in the shade, who thought they knew it all, who were lukewarm because of what they thought they knew, and they knew a lot, and they do know a lot. In fact, they'll argue with you right now, and maybe even more successfully argue with you with more knowledge than some of the Philadelphians who have a heart that says, yes, let's watch the news. Let's watch Steve Gilbreth's nightly Nightcast program and be right on top of the day's world news, which we'll get back to in just a moment. We're going longer tonight because of my expose here. But some of them in the Laodicean mindset may well know more than some of us, but because of that, they may have an attitude that leaves them lukewarm in their activities in the Luke 21:36 department that God instructed us through Jesus Christ's words to watch. Watch what? To watch the events he had just been describing, which represent the first 4 of the 6 seals. Watch for the white horse, watch for the red horse, watch for the black horse, watch for the pale horse, and the activities related to those in your world news daily. Watch a program like this or some good news report that, of course, they won't relate the stories to the Bible the way we do here, but watch your news daily and pray about it, which makes you become a part of the news, because as you pray about it, it's like God giving us the example of Elijah in James 5 when there had been no rain for 3.5 years. And then when it was good time to have the rain again because of the famine that had produced, Elijah was going and pleading, beseeching God for rain. He would pray fervently, and then he would go the sky to see if there were any clouds, and when no clouds were in the sky, back to his knees again, praying effervescently, fervently, God, bring us rain, we need rain. And he repeated that until, whoa, in the distance, there's a little cloud. And he knew that was God answering the prayer. He went and gave thanks, and the clouds continued to roll in and gather, and the thunder and the lightning that followed, and the rain hit the ground for the first time in 3.5 years because of the fervent praying of Elijah. And the example for us, friends, the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. And if you watch the world news and you pray, you see, people in America, we could be praying about what's going on in Ferguson, and that's in the news in a few moments here tonight yet. And we may see God turn things somewhat, depending on God's will. Now, we can't always break God's will, but we can at least cry out for people, and that may help the lives of some of the people involved. There is such a thing as when Gene Hogberg encouraged me several decades ago. He said, Steve, as he was kind of tutoring and mentoring me a little bit, he said, Steve, I want you to go get Galbraith's book and read The Culture of Discontent. And I did what he said. I got that book, read it, was surprised to see, oh, wow, this is going to be coming on in America. It's decades later before it's really, really beginning in any profound way, but here it comes. We'll have that in the news tonight in a moment. But as this next story, friends, relates to the white horse, indications in the news as we watch it daily. Friends, has my microphone been off during that whole time? I just noticed my light was off. Maybe I just hit it and knocked it off. Maybe not. I'm going to assume, I hope it was on. But I hope I just knocked it off for a couple of seconds. But I now have a tally light that's for the microphone up above the camera, so I can see if I've failed to turn on the microphone. And of course, the button we put in that works both the microphone and the tally light is if I lean on the desktop just the wrong way, I can accidentally hit that button. So maybe we'll have to move that somewhere else out of my arm reach so that I won't accidentally hit it like I just did. But Revelation 12, verse 19. And if for some reason, friends, my mic was off during that whole thing, I don't think it was. I usually glance over to a screen. I can see a volume unit, a VU audio meter, and tell whether our volume levels are correct or not. I think I saw it activated as I was speaking to you before just a few seconds ago. But Revelation 12, verse 19. And then I better move to the rest of our stories. We got a number of more news stories from today. Something caused me to get a little inspired speaking going here to you, friends. But verse 9 of Revelation 12 says, "And the great dragon, that was cast out, that old servant called the devil and Satan." Now that makes it expressly, absolutely clear who we're talking about here. The devil and Satan, who deceiveth the whole world, was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. But the main point here was, we just said it, was who deceiveth the whole world. The devil and Satan deceives, let me emphasize that part, the whole world. The whole world. I could have done it maybe in contrast by perverting the verse and said, the devil and Satan who deceives a few people here and there. No, that's not what the verse says. The verse says the devil and Satan who deceives who? Who did we just say, friends? Somebody come back? The whole world. That's right. The whole world. The whole world. Now, so we've got a situation where the whole world is deceived according to God's Word, the Holy Bible. And yet we've had an apostle for these latter days who restored many truths that have been hidden for a long time during 1,260 years of the church having to hide, and being martyred during that time and being put on a low scale. And yet God continued to keep a thread of that church alive even during that 1,260 years of persecution, and kept that thread alive so that when he raised up Mr. Armstrong, the baton could be passed to him. And, he probably taught those who will be the leader and those who will be the members of the Laodicean era of the Church of God. And they'll well know who was Mr. Herbert Armstrong. But we've got that era, and we've got the fifth seal yet ahead of us. Now, I know many of you disagree with me on that, but, that's your problem. And I'm telling it like it is. Like Mr. Armstrong taught it, like Titus 1 verse 9 tells his ministry to do, you teach as you were taught, not as you imagine in your own vain human thinking. Oh, there's an attitude. It's very big and prominent among us. Well, yes, that's true. But that's attitude. That's not, as God taught us through Mr. Herbert Armstrong, though, that the era, as an era, formally and officially begins when Philadelphia is taken to a place of protection, final training, and the fifth seal kicks off with mega trouble, great tribulation. That's when that era officially, formally commences. Period. End of sentence. Now, let's go on. Pope, and related to this first seal. Let's go ahead and we'll put that up on the screen. Pope Francis has warned that the world sees Europe as somewhat elderly and haggard. He said that during his speech today to the European Parliament in Strasbourg. The Pope said, you'll hear him say in this video, we have two videos for you tonight. One short one I'm going to play now, and one a little longer I'll play right at the end of our program. The Pope said the continent felt, quote, less and less a protagonist in a world that regarded it with mistrust. He also called for a united response to help the boatloads of migrants arriving in Europe. Friends, as I show you this, I want you to be aware of, you've got to read between the lines for this, but the reception he got, even though not everyone applauded, because you got some Protestant, and the last time, 26 years ago, when a pope spoke before the European Parliament, you had a protester, one of the members of the European Parliament from Ireland, stand up and say, the Pope is the Antichrist. He said that in that meeting. But there was no disruption or demonstration or protest of any kind during this Pope's speaking today. Now, at one point, nearly half didn't applaud for it, but everyone, 100%, they all stood up. And eventually the God of this world will have all the minds of the members of Parliament when it's reconstructed, when the European Parliament is reconstructed to be 10 nations, 5 from the east, 5 from the west, and let me revise my words there, like some of you will need me to do, or you'll come down on me and criticize me if I don't say it this way. 5 regions from the east, 5 regions from the west, or, rebordered nations, it may be, but 5 regionalized areas from the east and 5 from the west will give their power in a united Europe of some kind, the United States of Europe, or even this united Europe that's reformed and refashioned. Perhaps the Pope, this one or a future one, will help do that. But this Pope has certainly set the stage now. He was invited to address this group. He wasn't given a topic to speak on. That was totally open to him. And it does seem to me the God of this world, who deceives the whole world, and primarily he does it through that organization called the Roman Catholic Church. Hey, no holds barred here, my friends. Perhaps hired this Pope to say and speak as he did, so that, and he even drove up in a regular car, not his Pope-mobile, and with a certain humility that would cause him to be less disenfranchised by some, but who would cause him to be more welcomely received. And so at some point in time, when, especially as this disunited European Europe, the disunited EU, it's got its factions and problems now, they may say, hey, the only way we're going to really come together is have someone involved with us and engaged with us, like the Pope, who can bring us all together. And then the Pope will say, hey, and they'll either the Pope or they themselves will come up with this man whom the Pope will say, yes, that's the man, and we'll hold the coronation ceremony in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Emperor's Hall. I don't think we'll see history change that. I'm just basing that factor on history, friends. And I think we'll see the 7th and final head of the Holy Roman Empire be formally crowned in a coronation ceremony in Frankfurt, Germany, in the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany. And the Pope, who's always done that, the Pope will do that, whether this Pope or another Pope in the future. But I think it's coming together. It's coming together. It won't be tomorrow night. I think I'm safe to say it won't be next month. But who knows how fast God may decide to pull things together. Right now, we do know this, that the head of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, but wasn't in the news today associated with the Pope, he's on the carpet, and there's a motion underway to throw out Juncker because of claims of tax fraud and tax favorism and what have you, and when he was prime minister of a country before, Switzerland, Sweden, anyway, wherever he's being accused of wrongdoing, and there are many who want to throw him out and replace him. Now, and yet there's someone else who's the president, you'll see in this report, who's going to greet the Pope. If you don't see it in this report, I have it in a later report coming up. Now, did I read everything from the Bible I promised I'd read to you? I think I did. We did read Revelation 12:9, finally, that Satan deceives the whole world, and he does it through an organization known as, some of you are going to love me for this, known as the Roman Catholic Church, a church which helped, circa 650 A.D., helped create what's now known as the Islamic religion, and promoting and promulgating, helping Muhammad put together, and even helped him put together the writings somewhat, and financed it, and all that went behind what helped create the Islamic religion, another source that Satan uses in a most vicious way, in a horrifying way, to propagate thing Revelation 12:9 calls deception of the whole world, which Satan himself, God gives the discredit for that. All right, let's go to this video, friends. I'm a little long-winded. I'm a little stirred up and inspired by what's happening today with the Pope speaking a day earlier than I thought he would be. By the way, I checked my notes. The original statement of the Vatican, he would be speaking on November 26th, but there were no news stories telling us the date got bumped up a day. But thankfully, BBC, hats off to you for catching the report and reporting of his speaking out of Strasbourg, the Pope speaking out of Strasbourg today. Let's go to this first video with the BBC's Europe editor, Hewitt, giving us a very good report on the Pope's speaking in Strasbourg today.
This was the European establishment. Commissioners, MEPs, officials, all lined up in Strasbourg to welcome Pope Francis. It was not a pastoral visit, it was decidedly political. Addressing the European Parliament, he was unsparing. Citizens were increasingly mistrustful of the EU, he told them.
The great ideas which inspire Europe seem to have lost their attraction, only to be replaced by the bureaucratic technicalities of its institutions.
Europe, said, seemed elderly and haggard.
We encounter a general impression of weariness and aging, of a Europe which is now a grandmother, no longer fertile and vibrant.
He received a standing ovation, but his message was clear. Europe had lost its way.
The Pope's mission here was to wake up Europe, to encourage it to return to the great ideas of its founding fathers, and he warned against institutions becoming too bureaucratic, too aloof.
I asked the Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi whether he agreed with the Pope.
Assolutamente sì. Yes, absolutely yes.
Among the audience here, Eurosceptics said they felt justified.
He's really up to date. He's with it. He gets it. He made the point that the European Union is old, weary, futile.
The Eurosceptics, like this Mr. Farage in the house, he wants to destroy the institution. The Pope said reform the institution exactly because the institutions are needed.
The Pope was not arguing for less Europe. He wanted it to reclaim leadership on matters like migration, not to allow the Mediterranean to become a cemetery. But he laid down a challenge to Europe's leaders. Where is your vigour? Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Strasbourg.
Okay, Gavin Hewitt, thank you very much for that report out of Strasbourg. And friends, I have 1,000 notes from today's activity with the Pope, but I want to move that to the end of the program, because I want to try to hold this program to 1 hour. I want to quickly go over some of the news from today that you should be aware of. And this next story relates to some trouble for the United States. And because that's trouble, let's change this to the pale horse, because one of the descriptions Jesus Christ gave in plain language for this fourth seal, for between the third and fifth seal, was disturbances, troubled waters, figuratively, such as mobs and seditions. That's what we have in this next story. The U.S. town of Ferguson has seen rioting and looting after a jury decided not to bring charges over the killing of a black teenager, Michael Brown, who was shot by a white police officer, Darren Wilson, on the 9th of August, and thereafter protest sparked. A police chief said violence in the suburb of St. Louis, Missouri was probably much worse than on any night since the teenager's death. Aleem Makbul reports from Ferguson.
What I've seen tonight is probably much worse than the worst night we ever had in August.
Stop trying to turn over the police vehicle immediately.
I'm tired of being scared of myself. 18 years old, and I don't know what's going to happen to me in these streets.
Before the violence, there was nervous anticipation as a crowd gathered outside the police station. The mother of Michael Brown among those who came to hear if the officer who shot dead her unarmed son would be charged. He wasn't.
No, none of y'all know me, but I don't do nothing to nobody. They say so, they a lie.
Okay, friends, we're going to come on out of that, and I'll just say this much. You know, it's if you read the book by John Kenneth Galbraith on the culture of discontent, there is that element out there, and there have been a lot of what people could recognize as abusive treatment of a culture. And yet, regardless of culture, regardless of color, you know, parents, the Bible says parents should be responsible for the conduct of their children, and if a child is obstinate, and when he lets his pants hang below his butt, they ought to grab a belt and spank that flanking butt. You know, and when there's an obstinate attitude, God says, haul the kid before the elders. And if the elders are unable and the parents are unable to convince the kid that he should behave a little different, they don't see a change of behavior after consulting with them, then the parents are to participate with the leaders of the community in picking up stones and stoning that kid to death, the leaders of the community. If the parents can't handle him if the parents haven't done what God says to do, if that parent spares the rod, as the Bible says, they spoil the child. And parents, if you spoil your child, you know, when I was you leave him in a situation where he can cause and get himself into trouble. And when I was growing up, I was taught, even if the authority is abusive, you respect that authority for decency and order. But there's more behind that, of course. There's a culture of discontent. And, you know, I think I'm going to leave that part of the story. I'm going to leave any further comments on that alone. I do think I want to play this next video I have that shows the father speaking, where before the prosecuting attorney gave the verdict that the police officer wouldn't be indicted, the father did make a request that, I think that's what I have next. If it's possible, I may have this out of order. If it's not the father speaking next, the prosecuting attorney will announce the no probable cause for a Ferguson indictment announcement. It's one or the other coming up next, friend. Let's just go ahead and go right to it.
Prepared for another outpouring of emotion. The grand jury is due to announce whether to indict the police officer who shot dead an unarmed black teenager here in August.
Hello, my name is Michael Brown, Sr. My family and I are hurting. Our whole region is hurting.
In a new video, the boy's father has called for a non-violent response.
But hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain. I want it to lead to incredible change, positive change.
In the aftermath of Michael Brown's killing, Ferguson's streets were turned into a conflict zone.
Okay, friends, we gave you that part of the news in the earlier videos toward tonight, or just moments ago, actually. But Bob McCullough, you know, my heart out to the father. Any time a father loses a son, even if that son was exhibiting obstinate behavior, the father has lost a son, and that's a sad situation. And yet I do have to say this much. Some of you are not going to like this, especially those of you who are from that culture of discontent. You're all heated up and angry, emotional about it right now. You know, you spare the rod, you spoil the child, and obstinate behavior Well, this country's, the real problem is that this country is not obeying our Creator, and God says, when you obey me, I'll give you blessings. 5 of you will chase 100. I'll put your enemies down for you. When you're not obeying me, it'll be just the reverse, and if you still don't obey me, 7 times more. And when we're in a situation where God is allowing the country to be cursed, we can be cursed from within, and that sometimes can be some of the worst things we can suffer. But let's take a look at this video before we go back to the little bit more news about the Pope before we close it up. Bob McCullough, the St. Louis County prosecutor, has said there was no probable cause to indict Officer Darren Wilson over the killing of Michael Ferguson. Let's go to his comments.
It is important to note here and say again that they are the only people who have heard and examined every witness and every piece of evidence. They discussed and debated the evidence among themselves before arriving at their collective decision. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments. The physical and scientific evidence by the grand jury, combined with the witness statements supported and substantiated by that physical evidence, tells the accurate and tragic story of what happened.
Okay, friends, and let me come on out of there and come back here. I'm going to skip the next story that I had lined up for you regarding some protests going on in Mexico. Kind of funny in a way, and it's not too overly done, but I want to finish up with, I'm going to try to hold this down to reasonably an hour. I want you to hear the second video I have done by a different BBC reporter on the Pope's speaking before the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Let's go to that video for closing the program tonight.
Today, the promotion of human rights is central to the commitment of the European Union to advance the dignity of the person, both within the Union and in its relations with other countries. This is an important and praiseworthy commitment, because there are still too many situations in which human beings are being treated as whose conception, whose configuration, and whose utility can be programmed, and who can then be thrown away when they're no longer useful, because they're weak, because they're sick, or because they're old. What kind of dignity can there be without the possibility of freely expressing one's thought or professing without limit one's own religious faith? What dignity can there be without a clear juridical framework which limits the rule of force and enables the rule of law to prevail over the power of tyranny? What dignity can there ever be if men and women are subjected to all kinds of discrimination? And what dignity can a person ever hope to find when he or she lacks food and the bare essentials for survival, and yet doesn't have the work as dignity?
Okay, friends, so that's the audio on that out of Strasbourg, France. Today, Pope Francis whistle stop, which, by the way, I think that they're reporting that as, Tuesday. Pope Francis whistle stop visit to Strasbourg today disgruntled some who accused him of neglecting Europe. Many of Strasbourg's Catholics were upset that the Pope would not meet them or visit the city's cathedral. The 4-hour visit made by any pope abroad, the shortest made by any pope abroad, was his second European trip since his election last year. He traveled to Albania in September. Just summarizing now, addressing the Parliament today, the Pope called for action following the deaths of thousands of migrants who have drowned while trying to cross the Mediterranean. He said, "We cannot allow the Mediterranean to become a vast cemetery, he said. Pope Francis was greeted by the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz. And I think I got a photograph of, there he is, on the right side of your screen. Let me pull that forward real quickly. And friends, I wanted to cut us off in an hour, so that's it for tonight on Nightcast. Thanks for joining me. God willing, Creek Don't Rise. We'll be back again tomorrow evening. And until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying thanks for joining us. Good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.